Silence is often misunderstood as emptiness, yet in truth, it is one of the most powerful forces in human connection. When you withhold words, when you do not rush to respond or explain, something deeper takes place. The other person is confronted with themselves. In relationships, silence functions as a natural test. It exposes dynamics that might otherwise remain hidden beneath constant conversation. A man's reaction to your silence often reveals whether he respects your individuality or merely seeks control. In this way, silence becomes not a lack of communication, but a language of its own, a language that cannot be faked. In psychology, silence acts as a mirror. Carl Jung taught that what we project onto others in moments of uncertainty reflects the contents of our own unconscious. When a woman chooses silence, she does not create a void, she activates projection. Some men will experience this quietness as rejection, their shadow fears rushing forward, fear of abandonment, fear of invisibility, fear of losing dominance. Others will experience it as presence, recognizing that silence is simply space for breath, reflection, and respect. Their ability to remain calm in the pause says more about their maturity than any words they could offer. This is why silence is never neutral. It stirs what lies beneath. The man who respects you will not demand constant explanations. He will not interpret your pause as an insult or your distance as a threat. Instead, he will stay steady, honoring your rhythm without taking it personally. In contrast, the man who cannot tolerate silence will push, question, or accuse, revealing that his attachment depends less on love and more on control. Through silence, you see the truth that long speeches or constant defenses could never reveal. The psychological impact of this silent test is profound for the woman who dares to practice it. Choosing not to respond immediately is a way of protecting energy. It prevents you from being dragged into unnecessary conflict, manipulation, or emotional games. More importantly, it reinforces the belief that your value is not tied to your speed of reply or your willingness to soothe every insecurity. Each time you pause, you reclaim the right to act from clarity rather than compulsion. You are no longer caught in the cycle of proving yourself. Instead, you allow silence to prove him. Daily life provides countless examples of how this unfolds. You take longer to answer a message and observe his reaction. Is it impatience or respect? You remain quiet in an argument, letting the heat pass before speaking, and notice whether he grows louder or steadier. You choose to spend an evening alone without explanations and see if he honors that choice or pressures you. These are not small details, they are revelations. They reveal who can walk beside you without demanding constant reassurance, and who sees your silence as a threat rather than a boundary. For many women, embracing silence feels radical at first. Years of over-explaining, of rushing to justify feelings, of filling every gap with words make quietness seem unnatural. But once practiced, silence becomes liberating. It is no longer avoidance, but discernment. It is not coldness, but containment. A woman who understands the power of silence does not need to raise her voice to be heard. She communicates her strength in the pauses, her boundaries in what she does not say, her worth in the stillness she guards for herself. Ultimately, silence becomes one of the clearest tests of respect in any relationship. A man's response to it shows whether he values you as an equal or expects you to bend endlessly to his needs. The silent test is simple, but its implications are profound. Those who cannot endure your pauses will reveal their immaturity. Those who stay steady in the quiet will reveal their respect. And through it all, you discover that silence is not emptiness, it is presence. And presence is the truest language of dignity. There are limits that do not need to be announced out loud. They exist in the pauses, in the moments when you stop giving, when you let space speak on your behalf. A man's reaction to these unspoken limits often reveals more about him than anything he might say when everything seems easy. When you choose not to overextend yourself, when you slow the rhythm of your attention, you begin to see whether he respects your individuality or views it as an obstacle to his own desires. This is the quiet power of withholding, not as punishment, but as observation. Carl Jung taught that boundaries are not walls, but expressions of the self. When you choose to pause your giving, you're not shutting someone out. You are giving them the chance to show how they truly relate to you. Do they recognize your humanity, your right to rest, your need for space? Or do they react with irritation, as though your worth exists only in what you offer them? Silence and restraint in this sense are mirrors. They expose whether a man sees you as a whole person or as a resource to be consumed. Daily life is filled with subtle opportunities to observe this. You delay responding to a request, not because you cannot, but because you wish to see how he reacts to waiting. You choose to spend time on your own ritual instead of dropping everything for him, and notice whether he honors or resents your choice. You express fewer details about your private world and watch whether he leans in with patience or grows frustrated by not being given instant access. In each of these small tests, his response shows his character more clearly than any declaration of love. The archetype of the guardian is deeply connected to this posture. The guardian protects what is sacred without constant explanation. She does not open the gates to everyone. She requires reverence from those who approach. For women, this archetype emerges in the ability to sit firmly in presence without rushing to justify or accommodate. You become the keeper of your own energy, sharing it with those who prove worthy rather than scattering it for anyone who demands it. This is not arrogance, it is sovereignty. When a man accepts these quiet boundaries without pressure, he reveals maturity. He shows that he does not need constant proof to believe in your care. He trusts the relationship enough to let it breathe, to let you exist as an individual. His patience demonstrates respect, and his steadiness builds trust. Conversely, when a man insists on constant access, when he treats your pauses as betrayals, he reveals insecurity. What he cannot tolerate is not your silence, but his own fear of not being enough without control. The subtlety of this test is what makes it powerful. You do not need to issue ultimatums or craft elaborate strategies. The mere act of holding back, of pausing before giving more of yourself, creates the space where truth emerges. It is not about manipulation, but about clarity. You learn who meets you with respect when you are not performing, not providing, not endlessly explaining. In that space, the superficial falls away, and what remains is authentic connection. Ultimately, these unspoken limits preserve your dignity. They remind both you and him that your worth is not measured by how quickly you respond or how much you give. They affirm that your individuality is non-negotiable, and that anyone who wishes to walk beside you must respect it without being spoon-fed reminders. The test is quiet, almost invisible, but its results are undeniable. Those who respect you will honor the pause. Those who do not will fail it. And in both outcomes, you gain clarity without ever raising your voice. There is a peculiar discomfort that arises in some men when faced with a woman who does not rush to fill every silence, who does not hurry to reassure, who does not bend her time around their urgency. For many, silence is immediately interpreted as rejection. They feel unsettled, as though her calm presence is a threat to their sense of control. This discomfort is not about her at all. It is about the fears within them. Jung described this as the shadow, the hidden, unacknowledged aspects of the self that surface when triggered. In the face of a woman's autonomy, the male shadow often reveals itself in the form of impatience, suspicion, or even anger. The truth is that autonomy changes the balance of power. A woman who does not explain every pause unsettles a man who is used to being fed constant validation. Without words to hold on to, he is forced to sit with uncertainty, and uncertainty exposes his level of maturity. A man at peace with himself can accept the gap, trusting that her silence is not abandonment, but presence in another form. But a man still ruled by insecurity will take it personally, trying to reclaim control through pressure, questions, or emotional games. Her autonomy reveals his limits. This is why silence is never just silence. It is a mirror of emotional development. The man who can stand calmly in that space shows that he has reconciled with his own need for control. The one who grows restless reveals that his respect for her was conditional upon her constant availability. In this way, a woman does not need to test him deliberately. The mere act of living her own rhythm becomes the test. His response shows whether he sees her as an equal or as a mirror for his ego. Consider how this plays out in ordinary life. A woman decides not to answer a message immediately, and one man responds with understanding, while another sends follow-ups tinged with resentment. She chooses to spend a weekend for herself, and one man accepts it without hesitation, while another interprets it as a personal offense. She maintains her rituals of rest and care, and one man admires her discipline, while another feels neglected. The same silence, the same choice, yet completely different interpretations depending on the man's emotional maturity. Carl Jung emphasized that what we project onto others often reveals what we have not integrated within ourselves. The man who accuses her of being cold is often hiding his own fear of irrelevance. The man who grows impatient at her quiet is often struggling with his own inability to sit with himself. And the man who respects her space is the one who has faced his own shadows enough to allow her to have hers. In every case, her autonomy becomes the catalyst that unmasks his inner reality. For the woman, this awareness is liberating. She no longer needs to decode words or rely on promises. She can simply observe reactions. If her silence produces pressure, she learns that the connection is fragile. If it produces calm, she sees that respect is present. Silence turns into a diagnostic tool, not by design, but by nature. It shows who can truly walk beside her without demanding her constant surrender. In the end, the discomfort that some men feel is not her burden to carry. It is their unfinished work, their unresolved shadows, their unhealed dependence on control. And in witnessing this, she learns that her silence is not an absence, but a boundary. It separates those who seek to own her from those who seek to honor her. And in that separation lies her greatest strength, the knowledge that autonomy is not isolation, but the clearest expression of self-respect. There is a paradox in silence that few recognize at first glance. The less you explain yourself, the more others must reveal who they truly are. When a woman chooses not to justify every decision, not to fill every pause with reassurance, she shifts the dynamic of power. Suddenly, the man must step forward with clarity. He can no longer rely on her endless giving or her constant explanations to anchor him. In this quiet reversal, desire begins to transform into respect, because he realizes that her dignity is not something negotiable, not something she will trade for attention. Carl Jung often emphasized that the soul speaks through what is withheld as much as through what is expressed. In silence, a woman communicates boundaries without uttering a word. Her pause tells him that his place is not guaranteed, that respect is the only currency with which he can approach. This is not manipulation, it is presence. A man faced with such presence has only two choices: to rise and meet it with reverence, or to retreat because he cannot stand in its steadiness. Either way, the silence exposes his truth more clearly than her words ever could. The psychological impact of this paradox is profound. Men who are accustomed to being pursued suddenly find themselves confronting a different kind of woman, one who does not chase, one who does not plead, one who does not barter her worth. They must decide if their interest is strong enough to survive without constant reassurance. Those who stay begin to respect her not because she demanded it, but because she lived it. Respect is earned in the silence where dignity stands firm. Everyday stories illustrate this hidden power. A woman refuses to explain why she needs time to herself, and instead of pressuring, a man learns to honor her space. Another chooses not to argue when disrespected, simply stepping away, and the absence of her presence teaches him more than hours of confrontation could. Another stops over-explaining in her relationships, allowing silence to replace her justifications, and she watches as the men around her begin to adjust, realizing that if they want to remain close, they must act with care. Silence becomes her most eloquent teacher. The paradox also reveals the depth of energy in the feminine when it is no longer scattered. Jung connected this to the archetypal queen, whose authority is not loud, but unquestionable. She does not explain why the throne is hers. Her presence makes it obvious. Similarly, when a woman stops justifying her existence, her very stillness demands recognition. Men who are sensitive to this energy respond with reverence, because they sense that what she offers is rare, not availability, but authenticity. This is not to say that silence removes all desire. On the contrary, it refines it. Men who cannot endure the absence of constant affirmation fade away, but those who remain find that their desire has deepened into something more stable. They begin to admire not only her charm, but her character, not only her attention, but her autonomy. Desire becomes tethered to respect, and respect becomes the condition for intimacy. What started as a quiet pause grows into a redefined relationship dynamic. In the end, the paradox of silence is this: by saying less, you are heard more. By offering less, you are valued more. By refusing to negotiate your dignity, you inspire respect rather than demand it. This is not a strategy, but a way of being. The women who understand this do not waste words proving their worth. They embody it. And in their silence, they do not lose love. They purify it, ensuring that only what is real can remain. There comes a moment when silence is no longer accidental but chosen, no longer a reaction but a practice. When a woman embraces silence as part of her worth, she begins to weave it into her life like a sacred thread. It is not about withholding affection, nor about playing games. It is about remembering that she does not need to explain herself to be valid. Pauses, distances, and quiet spaces become allies, shaping a rhythm that protects her soul. In these pauses, she reclaims the truth. My value does not depend on constant availability. Carl Jung described individuation as the journey of becoming whole, and silence is an essential part of that journey. When a woman rests in silence, she withdraws from the noise of demands and expectations and reconnects with her essence. Each pause becomes a symbol of self-possession, each moment of quiet a reminder that her life is hers to direct. Silence becomes less about what is absent and more about what is present. Strength, clarity, and dignity. In that stillness, she grows more magnetic because she has nothing to prove. This conscious use of silence transforms relationships. Men who once expected endless explanations discover that they must meet her in action, not just in words. Those who cannot tolerate the pause fade away, revealing their lack of respect. Those who stay learn to see her differently. They begin to understand that her silence is not rejection, but a form of truth. It communicates that love cannot survive without reverence, that dignity is not negotiable, and in this understanding, respect replaces entitlement. Silence also changes how she sees herself. No longer compelled to rush, to soothe, or to justify, she feels a freedom she had not known before. Decisions become clearer. Energy once wasted on explanations is redirected toward creation, healing, and growth. Even her presence in a room begins to shift, steadier, calmer, commanding without demanding. Others notice, though they cannot always name it. What they feel is the authority of someone who has learned to guard her worth with quiet certainty. Daily rituals reinforce this practice. A morning spent in reflection instead of answering messages. An evening walk where her phone stays behind. A deliberate pause before responding to conflict, letting silence clear the noise before words are chosen. These small acts build a sanctuary within her life, a space that no one else can invade. Over time, the silence ceases to be a shield of defense and becomes a throne of presence. She is no longer hiding. She is reigning. In Jungian terms, this is the emergence of the queen archetype. The queen does not explain her authority. Her choices embody it. She does not fight for respect. Her stillness commands it. Her silence is not emptiness, but sovereignty. And her magnetism is born not of performance, but of alignment. The man who recognizes this sees that her pauses are not absence, but power, and he approaches with reverence. The one who cannot fades into the distance where he belongs. So silence becomes more than a response. It becomes a declaration. It declares that your value is not a debate, that your dignity is not a bargain, that your worth does not need to be justified. In a world that demands constant noise, your quietness becomes a rare form of strength. And in that strength lies the ultimate revelation. The man who truly respects you will never fear your silence. He will honor it, knowing that within it lives the essence of who you are, whole, steady, and unforgettable.